This morning, we want to be a church that is a God-first church. What does that look like? What does that mean as a church? What does that mean for us as believers in Jesus Christ? We want to be God-centered. We want to have Him as the priority over ourselves, over our ministries, over everything that God has given to us, and making sure that He has the appropriate place that He needs. And in the last week we talked about that. We talked about the battle for the throne in our life and what it looks like for us to be people that put God first, put our time, our talents, and our treasures first. And we talked about many Old Testament examples about how God laid that out for us, and understanding this principle of God being first. Last week we talked about the importance of understanding that all that we have is God's, and the importance of what it looks like in returning a portion of that to Him. Returning that not as a gift, not as an offering, but as a declaration to say, 100% of everything that I have is yours, so I'm going to return this to you. Today, we're going to move forward in this same series. We're going to be looking at the story in Luke chapter 9. But before we go there, we're going to be talking about the principle of multiplication. The principle of multiplication and what it means for things and blessings in God to work in the multiplication and better use of our time, our talents, and our treasures that we have set aside to be used by God, and see how God wants to use them to be multiplied in our lives. Now, this message, probably more than any of them in this series, can come across, if you're not careful, in listening to them in the wrong way, which would be what is popular in our culture called the prosperity gospel. Give and it will be multiplied and you'll be rich. That's not what we're preaching. That's not what I'm preaching this morning. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm simply talking about the understanding of the principle that comes from what stewardship looks like and how that works when we give things to God and how He returns them back to us through blessing and through closer walk with Him and so on as we walk this road with Him. Luke chapter 19, verses 12 through 17 says this: Late in the afternoon, the 12 came and said to Him, "Send the crowd away so they can go to the surrounding villages and countryside to find food and lodging, because we are in a remote place here." He replied, "You give them something to eat." They answered, "We only have 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, unless we go and buy food for all this crowd." About 5,000 men were there. Many people miss this point. Let me just pause for a minute. Many people miss this point. It says 5,000 people were there men were there at this gathering. It's actually believed that was the men only. So it's not too far to multiply that out to understand that there could have been 20,000 people there. Matter of fact, some people believe there were more people here than there were at the Sermon on the Mount. Okay? Going on, but he said to His disciples, "Have them sit down in groups of about 50. The disciples did so, and everyone sat down. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, He looked up to heaven, gave thanks, and broke it. Then He gave them to the disciples to distribute to the people. They all ate, and they were all satisfied. And the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of the broken pieces that were left over." All right. So we're going to step back from this story for just a minute, and we're going to tell the story. We're going to think about a little bit of how this played out. You know, the Bible gives us the quick details of how these things went, but let's just imagine that you're part of the 12 disciples, and you're with Jesus, and this big crowd, the largest that has ever been gathered, is there together, and they're hearing Jesus talk. And let's just say, for the case of the story, that Jesus started about that good holy hour of like 10:30, 11, and begins to preach, and he begins to talk to the people of Jesus. And he's doing really good, and he's healing sick, and people, and we're seeing all these good things happen. And so as these things go on, and Jesus keeps going and going, 12 turns into 1, and 1 turns into 2, and 2 turns into 3, and 3 into 4, and on, until we get to verse 12. Where we started. Now, we read from the NIV this morning, but the ASV version says this: "And the day began to wear away." Let me translate that into Greek for you. And the day began to wear away. It was getting late. People were getting tired. And so just imagine for a minute that you're one of the 12 disciples. And you're sitting there, and you gather as a committee, and you go, guys, come over here. We need to have a little chat. You see, this guy's doing a really good job. Jesus is doing great. I mean, there's nobody as good as him. But I'm going to tell you right now, I'm getting hungry. And if I don't get some food really fast, I'm gonna drop dead. I'm starving. And one of them said, that's it. Let's tell Jesus the people are hungry. Oh, yeah, the people. Yeah, he seems to really care about the people. So let's pretend that you're the spokesman, and you're out and meeting over with the disciples. And okay, I'll go talk to him. You go to Jesus and you say, excuse me, sir. Excuse me, Jesus. This is really good. I mean, this is good. This series of messages that you've preached all in one day, man, these are great messages. But I'm concerned about the people. I think that they're getting hungry. And I'm just telling you that things have been good, but I think we should let these people go so that they can get some food. Oh. So Jesus said, Jesus says you're concerned about the people. Yeah, I'm concerned about the people. Oh, okay. So look at what Jesus says to them in verse 13. But he said to them, you give them something to eat. So you're standing there with Jesus, and Jesus, okay, well, you give them something to eat. What? Jesus, excuse me? Yeah, you give them something to eat. You're going, okay, that didn't work out how I planned. Now I got to go tell these other 11 guys what Jesus just said. So you work your way over to the other 11, and you report back, and they say, well, what did he say? And you say, well, he said you give them something to eat. What? He said you give them something to eat. And in that moment, a little boy that just came from town had a Long John Silver's bag in his hand, and you grab it and open it up, and he's got 2 fish and some extra rolls. Peter grabs one. Whoa, Peter, that's all we have. That's all we've got. Oh, that's it, one of them says. That's all we have. Go tell Jesus this is all we've got, and then maybe he'll know to send him away. Oh, okay. Let me give that a try. All right, Jesus. Like I said, this is going really good. Your preaching is phenomenal. But we've done some looking around, and the only thing that we found is 2 pieces of fresh fish and some rolls. That's it. That's all we got. So I think we're going to have to go back to plan A. And Jesus, I'm going to need you to wrap it up. Jesus, can you wrap it up a little bit? Jesus, what? Jesus says 2 fish and 5 loaves. That's what you have? Yes, Jesus, that's all we've got. Well, tell the people to sit down and gather in groups of 50. No, Jesus, you don't understand. 2 fish, 5 loaves. We don't have bags full of 2 fish and 5 loaves. That's all we have, Jesus. 2 fish, 5 loaves. That's it. No, go have the people sit down in groups of 50 and watch, and we'll feed them. Now, I wonder in that moment if Peter and some of the disciples began to remember some Old Testament stories and remember about the time when Elijah fed 100 men with 12 loaves of bread. To begin to go, oh, okay, wait a minute. I think I might know where this is going. I think I have an understanding of what Jesus is going to do. You know what? I want to see this. And so somebody like Peter may have rushed up to him and wanted to grab the loaves and say, here, Lord, bless it so we can do this. Let's read what happens in verse 16. And he took the loaves and the 2 fish, and he looked up to heaven, and he blessed them and broke them and said, give to the disciples, and gave to the disciples to set before the multitude. So here's what really happened. Jesus took the bread, he broke it in half, and he gave it to Peter. And Peter says, wait, are you done praying? Yeah, I'm done praying. Go and give it out, Peter. And Peter says, okay, don't you need to pray some more? No, Peter, it's blessed. Go and give the food out. Give the bread out. So Peter goes, and he begins to give out his bread, and he says, here, you take some. Here, take some. Oh, don't take too much. You take some. And as that bread came down to almost nothing left, a miracle happened and that bread continued to grow until the scripture tells us till everyone was fed. The miracle, I believe, happened in the hands of the disciples as they gave the bread out that had been blessed by Jesus. The miracle didn't happen in the master's hands. It happened in the hands of the disciples when they obeyed the master. So there's two key points that I want you to take away from this story this morning. It has to be blessed before it can be multiplied. We're talking this morning and in this series about your time, your talents, and your treasures. And in this story, we see that this could not have happened had Jesus not blessed it. If the disciples would have just given away before it would have been blessed, nothing would have happened. It would have fallen short and the people would have went away hungry. And I want you to think about that for a minute. When it comes to your time and your talents and your treasures that you are sacrificing and giving to God in various different places, do you bless them before you give them out? Do you pray and give them, as we talked about a little bit last week, in an attitude of worship? In understanding that what I am doing is an act of returning to God, whatever it may be in these three areas, that I'm giving them to God for Him to use, and I don't want to give them out sloppily because I feel guilted into it, because I'm obligated to do it, because I have to. Like all of those things become reasons why we do these things because of pressure put on from the wrong places. And God's saying, no, the lesson this morning is saying, no, that's not how it works out. That's not how it plays. It needs to be blessed, and it needs to be given in a way that benefits the kingdom, and God wants to use it as a way to continue to multiply it, to continue to allow things to be done that could not be done in any other way. You see, I believe in our lives. I believe in the life of the body of the church. God will ask us to do things that on paper don't make sense. That on paper, you come together with your board or your committee or whatever it might look like, and you lay the idea down on paper, whatever it may be, and you go, we can't do that. We don't have the resources. God says, I'm asking you to do it. Will you step out and step into what I'm asking you to do and watch what I do when you come together and you agree and you push forward? Same thing happens in our own personal life. God will say, hey, I want you to lead this Bible study. I want you to be involved with kids ministry. I want you to begin to practice giving and tithing and how that works out. And you go, but I can't. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. God says, watch and trust me in this process. Trust me in the place and space that you're going. You see, as a church now, just to speak of this, we are a receiver of these things. Each and every one of you here have been givers of those things. Many of you have been givers of those things, of your time, your talents, and your treasures of this place. And could I tell you and stand up here and say we could probably use a little bit more help? We could probably use a little bit more talent. We could probably use a little bit more treasure. That on paper is true. But we need to be good stewards of that as a church. We need to be people that are making sure we're not doing things in our own strength. I don't stand up here, and I said this last week, I don't stand up here and pray that the message and the attitude that comes from my mouth as the pastor of this church is not to guilt or pressure to understand any level of our need. Because that's not what this is all about. This has nothing to do with that. I fully trust that God is going to lead us, guide us, and direct us in the place that we need to go, and whether you give or participate is on you. But God's going to continue to do something. Will you join us? Will you join Him in that? But we have to be faithful as a pastor, as board members, as leaders, as we look at this. And helping position this attitude and this understanding, realizing that you're not just filling a job, but when God blesses what you're doing and putting seeds in people's lives, those things will be multiplied. Let me take a little bit of a sidetrack on this for just a minute. To speak to a little bit of a health in the church parishioner relationship when it comes to issues like this, specifically speaking of your time and your talents. There are two strong words in the English language that we use and maybe don't use and maybe inappropriately use or get guilted into using the right or the wrong way, and they're yes and they're no. Churches, people don't like the word no. Will you help with this? Oop, pastor asked. Oh. Yes. Little movie popped into my head there, if you can think about what movie that might have been. You want to say no. Every part of you does not want to do what the pastor or someone in the church is asking you, and you go, I have to say yes, the pastor asked. Can I tell you that's the most unhealthy thing churches do? If we as a church cannot be a church and need to create an environment where yeses can be yeses and nos can be nos without excuse or reason, oh no, I can't, I gotta go, I gotta. We don't need those. Yes or no. How freeing would that be if you felt like you could say yes and you could say no without any stipulation, without any question? You begin to create an attitude in the church where I think the yes becomes easier and the yes becomes more powerful. Because now you're going to God and you're saying, okay, God, I heard Pastor Jeff's message. I want to give of my time and my talents. And I want to engage the church. I want to find places and areas where I can do something. Or I'm in an area I don't want to be in anymore. I've been in it a long time and I'd like to get out. If we can position ourselves as a church to where we'll allow people to say no and trust God with that no, and trust God with that yes, I think we'll begin to see things change. I'm not perfect at this, but if you've had any interactions with me or you've heard me ask some of these asks, there are times that I will say, to be quick to say to somebody, no is an acceptable answer. Trying to take that pressure off and allow things to be free. So two things. If you're in a situation in this church anywhere where you feel like you can't say no and you want to, and I might regret this statement, I'm giving you permission to say no. I need to step back. I'm giving you permission to step away from something, no matter the ties, no matter the length, no matter what it is, to step back and say no. Ministry leaders, I hope that you'll join me in being able to freely hear that and go, okay, that's going to be good and healthy. And then begin to pray and ask God where those places in our lives are that He wants us to say yes to. And I think it'll be interesting if we really follow this to watch how God might change some ministries and raise up some ministries because people are paying attention to where their yeses and their nos goes. And I think God would actually, in some ways, direct our church in a path because people have these places and spaces. Now, let me back up and throw a small caveat, and I don't want to undo what I just did. There are times and places where if some work needs to be done and some manual labor, that you step up and you do it. And you got to find that balance. Do you hear what I'm saying? You got to find that balance to say, yeah, if the church, if the church is flooding and we need to go take care of it, we're going to get up and we're going to go take care of it, right? And there's places where we as a body do those things. There's got to be a balance in here where there is times that we're part of the body, we're part of the family, and we step up and we do these things. Then there's other places where we need to just hear what I said and pray and seek and say, all right, God, I'm going to take this understanding of my time and talents and treasures seriously, and I want to use them for the best of your kingdom, so help me to seek you and seek the way you would have me as I look forward and I look for my yeses and my nos to be important and to be used appropriately. And when I need to say yes and step out on faith with a little fear, I'll say yes. And when I need to say no and step out on faith with a little fear, I'll be able to use those words in a way to help be the best that I can be for you. The second thing is that it has to be given away before it can be multiplied. Sometimes we want to keep things under control. We want to make sure they're working out in a way that makes sense. We want to make sure all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, that everything's organized in such a way. And it's this is that faith moment in our relationship with God where God says, all right, math doesn't add up. Things don't make sense. You got 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread, and I need you to give those away. And you go, this isn't going to work. And there's a point of faith that says, all right, I'm going to give it away. Even though I don't understand, I don't see how this is going to happen. There's a point where in order for it to really be used, multiplied, taken to the full use that God wants to set it out for, you have to give it away. You have to release it. It happens on the altar. Hopefully when we come to the altar and we say, God, here's this moment in my life where I'm broken, I'm lost, and I'm out of control. I got no other choice but to lay it before you. Happens all the time on Tuesday nights at these altars. People far broken in various different places at the end of their rope, and they say, God, I want to give my whole life to you. I got to surrender. They don't even know what it looks like. They don't even know what it means. Sometimes we don't. Oftentimes when we make those surrender points, we don't know what it looks like and we don't know what it means. There's a little fear and trepidation that comes in that. We say, God, have it all. And then we get to these 3 things: time, which we all have a limited amount of; talent, which we all have different talents; and treasures, we all have a variety of amounts of those, where these are actual physical ways that we give to God. And we trust him without control. We trust him without any of that together to watch what he's going to do. And it's a matter and it's an action of faith that allows him to multiply those things. So practically speaking, for just a moment, I want to talk to you about those 3 areas of 3 areas in which it helps set yourself up in a way to be able to give these things away, to be able to be free in how you work and use your time, your talents, and treasures, freeing yourselves up to allow God to use them. Sometimes there's so much stuff in our life. There's so much chaos in our life. There's so much struggle in our life, we can't even think about giving anything away. We can't give away our time and our talents. We can't give away our money. So I want to talk about 3 things that specifically help us in that. The first is to get out of debt. Now, when you first see that, you think, oh, he's talking about finances. I am, but we'll skip that for just a minute. There's a debt in our soul. There's a debt in our time. Let's talk about that. We all got 24 hours in a day. We've been talking about this in our Sunday school class about hurry and busyness. We all have it stacked to the hilt with as much as we can pile in there, and there's no margin of being able to give any of it away because we probably are committed to more stuff than there are hours in the day. We're in debt to our time. And therefore our talents and anything else that go along with that, it all just piles up, and we can't. So in our Sunday school class, we've been talking about what it looks like to slow that down. We're going to begin to talking about Jesus' pace and silence and solitude and prayer and actually taking a breath and paying attention to all of these different areas in life where chaos abounds and what it means to slow down and get back to the pace of Jesus. Get out of debt, I would say, in this avenue so that we can actually have some margin to give. So that we can say yes when we want to say yes. You see, sometimes we want to say yes, and we look at our calendar and our busyness, and we can't. Because there's too many other things going on. It's just not even possible. You've heard me say it before, too, and it kind of all relates in this same type of thing. Every time you say yes to one thing, you are saying no to something else. So it's important to identify where that no is. Because sometimes we don't even pay attention. Or we don't say no and we pile it up. But we should be saying no to something else. Being able to figure out that process so that we can be healthy. Financially speaking, when it comes to your finances, Kate and I can testify to this as well. I know some others of you in this room can. That when you walk the road, and that's part of why Financial Peace is coming on the end of this sermon series, You don't understand it until you're out of debt, but when you're out of debt, financially, and you don't have all this weight of all this other debt and all these other things going on, everything changes. The Bible says that the borrower is slave to the lender. There's a sense of slavery that you become under that you don't think about and you don't realize until you allow yourself to step out of that and live within your means and understand how it looks like to put these things in order. And I just challenge you, maybe you've never heard this. Maybe you haven't been raised in this understanding, different people in different lifestyles, and we live in a consumer mentality where you just go get a credit card out, pay for it, it'll take care of itself later. Like, there's breaking of that's not biblical, that frees us up in so many other areas in life, including being able to give, but in so many other places as well that can offer us that peace. So one thing that will help set us up in this place is to get out of debt. The second thing is to not manipulate. Don't try and manipulate God. I've done this before. All right, God, if you do this, I'll do this. All right, God, I'm going to do this, but you need to do this. And we begin to put stipulations behind what we're doing and how we're doing it. We put just an understanding of, okay, if this, then I'm going to do this. Or however that works. So many different ways where I have in the past manipulated God, put requirements on God to say, I'll serve you if you'll do this. And it holds us back. Because we've manipulated something or we've tried to get something to work in such a way. And the last thing is to learn what it looks like to really give. Not give because somebody asked and you feel guilted. Give meaning, I'm going to give this and I'm going to walk away. I'm not going to worry about the outcome. I'm trusting. It's a faith statement. It's doing it because of God's instruction. You give and then you walk away. And you don't worry or think about it past that moment that you have given it. Because you're doing it as an act of worship. You're doing it as an act of trusting God. And whether, again, it's the time, the talents, or the treasures, it doesn't matter. It's a giving out of worship. And there's a freedom in when that happens. When you have the place and the space in it, because you're out of debt in those areas, and you have the ability to just do it, and then you can turn and walk away from it, and God will begin to open up an understanding of what he's done. You'll begin to see things work. You'll see things multiply past that in the areas and places and spaces that you've given. I think we've seen an example of that in this church. When I went to Trotter House the first time, right after I'd gotten here, Kate and I went there and had a tour. And we came across the donation wall. And I'll just tell you, and I know from not just finances, but of time and talent, this church's hands are written all over the wall, literally and figuratively, of the Trotter House. And if you follow what the Trotter House has done, is doing, or whatever, God has continued to multiply that and continued to see that ministry grow and grow and grow and affect a lot of young women in our community as they've helped and supported them and they've taught them the gospel. And that ministry has just kept going. Because of what we have done to give, it has been multiplied. So I don't know where it is for you this morning and what that place is that God's speaking to you in your time, your talents, and your treasures. Which one of those areas we usually pop up pretty quick into where you might be the most overwhelmed. Don't make this a matter of me. Don't make this a matter of guilt. Make this a matter of you and God saying, God, I feel this pressure. I feel this area in my life overwhelmed with busyness, overwhelmed with debt, overwhelmed with strife. How can I get it under control so that it can be used for you? So that it can be used as an act of worship and as an act of giving glory and honor to you because of what you have so graciously done for me. Would you stand to your feet? The worship team is going to come up and lead us in a closing song. And I just pray this morning that each one of us will grab that area and that place in our life and begin to understand who God is and what he wants to do. As I believe he's probably planting seeds in you as to what he wants to do in your life and through your life, through this attitude of worship to him.